Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. Evelyn spun in front of the mirror in the fitting room of the bridal salon and tried on one bridal dress after another, admiring each one. She felt like a princess from a fairy tale. Such beauty, such a flying airiness outfit the girl had never worn, and not even dared to dream. Evelyn smiled to herself and thought dreamily, "How lucky I am. My James is the best you can find. He's rich, he's athletic, he's kind, he's good-hearted. It was as if I'd been haunted by an evil fate ever since I was born." The thing is, Evelyn is an orphan. Her mother didn't die, didn't get sick. Nothing bad happened to her. She just gave birth to her daughter. And then she just abandoned her, without even looking at her or giving her a name, and ran away from the maternity hospital. So, right from the maternity hospital, the baby went first to the orphanage, and then to the orphanage. Nannies gave the girl a name, hoping that someone would love and adopt such a beautiful baby girl. Throughout her childhood, Evelyn bore a grudge against her mother. She didn't understand why she should have given birth at all, if the child wasn't needed. How could she give up her child in cold blood like that, never once think of her child, and live her life in peace? Evelyn, of course, had a hard time at the orphanage. She didn't see life outside those dreary walls at all. She had to fight with the elders. Sometimes they took away her lunch, stole her things, and bullied her constantly. Evelyn probably wouldn't have survived alone. Broke down, but she had a best friend, Helen. She, like Evelyn, was also an orphan, her mother having died in a drunken stupor. From day one, the girls had stuck together, were a mountain for each other. It was easier to fight and learn together. They even looked a lot alike, both with long braids, blonde hair, and neat snub noses. Many people thought of Evelyn and Helen as sisters. They even wanted to adopt Helen when she was 9 years old, but she refused to go to a new family without Evelyn. They liked to sit on the windowsill with their feet hanging down and dream that someday they would get out of that awful place, fall in love with beautiful princes, and be the happiest of all. Their souls were consonant. The girls understood each other with a half word and shared their innermost secrets, sorrows, and grievances, and it was a little easier for both of them. Once, when Evelyn was in 7th grade, they were taken to the river for a swim. It was a real experience for the orphanage children, who hardly saw anything outside of the orphanage. But no one warned them that the current here was very fast, and there were even whirlpools. The girls decided to swim to the other side for lilies. They just beckoned with their beauty, although the rules categorically could not do so. And the girls were not very good at swimming, but it seemed to them that the river was not so wide. The two of them could cope. In the middle of the river, Evelyn's legs suddenly cramped up. She began to scream and flounder, panicked, and began to sink. The other guys panicked and didn't know what to do, since many of them couldn't swim at all. As the frightened educator jumped into the water and swam to save the girls, her friend also rushed to her aid. By some miracle, Helen was able to lift Evelyn to the surface, and she clung to a snag, desperately gulping for air and spitting out water, coughing heavily, but the girl herself did not survive. She was swept away by the rough current directly into the whirlpool. Helen's body was never found. The search with volunteers continued for a week. The death of her friend was a terrible blow to Evelyn. She screamed wildly at her funeral and blamed herself for her death, because, in fact, it was so. After that tragedy, Evelyn ended up in a psychiatric hospital and was treated with strong medications, after which the girl barely regained consciousness. She became sad, quiet and thoughtful, and very withdrawn. Even the boys were afraid of her, thinking she was possessed. After graduating from the orphanage, Evelyn, as an orphan, was given a room in the dormitory. During her time at the orphanage, she had seen many broken, crippled lives. The girls became night fairies and were just used by everyone. The boys slipped down to the bottom, shot and smoked illegal substances, or drank heavily. Many were already in juvenile detention for stealing, a frequent occurrence at the orphanage. But Evelyn was determined not to repeat their fate, and to spite everyone, especially her mother who had abandoned her, she would go out and become a human being. Evelyn managed to get a job as a waitress in a small, cozy restaurant. The owner took pity on the poor orphan and took her on probation. The work itself was easy. The girl coped well with her duties. It was much harder to learn how to get along with people and always be in a good mood. After all, children who have been in an orphanage often become disoriented and have trouble adapting in the modern world. In this, Evelyn was helped a lot by her partner, Kelly. She wondered at first how such an unsociable boob could work as a waitress. After all, you need to be able to not only skillfully serve food, but also to communicate properly, to get along and please customers. When she saw Evelyn blush and go into a stupor, not knowing what to say to the visitor, she began to lecture her. "Evelyn, honey, that's not the way to do it. You'll scare away all the regulars. Why do you bite like vinegar? You're young and pretty, so take advantage of it. Carry the tray, relax, smile, think of something good. You'll get better tips, and you'll have more customers coming in more often." The girl sighed sadly. "That's the thing, Kelly. Since I was born, there has been nothing good in my life. I am an orphan, an orphanage, humiliated, and my friend died because of me. The room I was given was horrible, all holes and cracks. No repairs have been made in ages. Where to get a good thing here? And anyway, I'm used to expecting nothing but trouble from other people. I know you're right, you need to change, but how to do it? I do not understand." Kelly shook her head. "Yeah, your fate, of course, is not enviable. But you know, if you keep thinking about bad things, they will attract to you. Look, the room is bad. That's a minus, but you don't have to pay rent. That's a plus. Let me help you. I'll come on the weekend. We'll glue fresh wallpaper. I have unnecessary curtains and a couple of blankets. Create comfort. It will be better. And you dream of a good groom. Imagine what he'll be like. You'll see a smile appear. Cheer up." So, little by little, with the help of her partner, Evelyn loosened up, smiled, and interacted vividly with customers. Kelly helped her get her room up to code, and her life slowly began to get better. She often imagined what her long-awaited prince would be like. Tall, slender, with kind eyes and strong arms. Evelyn dreamed they would waltz, and he would kiss and embrace her. And then one day a miracle happened, and the prince of her dreams came to their restaurant for lunch. Her heart immediately raced, and she served him dinner like a queen, swaying her hips unhurriedly and smiling dazzlingly. The boy smiled back at her, too, and winked. "Girl, honey, you have to help me right away. It's a matter of life and death." Knave Evelyn took everything seriously and frightenedly asked, "Of course I will. What's wrong? You're sick. We have a first aid kit in the kitchen. You want me to get it?" The guy smiled even wider and replied, "Yes, I've just been pierced through the heart by a Cupid's arrow. I'll die on the spot if I don't get your number. My name, what's yours?" Evelyn immediately flushed to the top of her head and replied, "I'm Evelyn. Nice to meet you. Why do you have my phone number, if it's not a secret?" James answered honestly, "I want to invite you to a movie tonight. Would you mind? It would be a pleasure to spend time in the company of such a charming lady." So the couple began to date. James was very tactful, gallant, gentle. They kissed passionately, walked around the city at night, and could not talk enough. Evelyn realized at once that this was the right prince, one and for life, because they were so warm, calm, and good together. At first, the girl was a little wild shy, did not know how to behave in the theater or at the exhibition, because no one had taught her anything, in fact. But James was very tactful and patient. He slowly, gently, and calmly opened to Evelyn a completely different world. It turned out there were so many interesting things around. The boy was amazed that Evelyn had never even been to the zoo. He marveled at how excited and amazed she looked at the animals. She fed the donkey from her hand and took pictures with a boa constrictor. The girl rejoiced at every bouquet presented and simply idolized her fiancé. Only one thing Evelyn was worried about. James, how would your parents feel about me being an orphan and having no money or education? You come from a family of businessmen, don't you? Will they probably mind? The groom hugged the bride tighter and cheered her up. Don't worry, everything will be fine. My father is a worldly man. He himself started from the bottom, grew up in a dysfunctional family. He achieved everything on his own, worked till he broke a sweat. He also got a wife from a simple family. My mother came from a village. That's the way it is. Daddy can't stand all this glamorous crowd and high society. He likes simple and honest people, so your parents are sure to like you. And so it was. Evelyn went to the house and was shaking like a leaf on a hornet's back. A shower. But from the threshold she was warmly and cordially welcomed. To her surprise, the mansion was furnished, expensive, tasteful, but without excessive pomp. The parents also turned out to be nice and simple people. Her father's name was Arthur, an intelligent gray-haired man with a neat beard, and her mother, Helen, was also dressed simply. A walking suit and a modest bundle at the back of the head, a minimum of cosmetics. No false eyelashes or false fingernails at all. Evelyn wanted to do something nice and baked a Napoleon cake herself, but she was very afraid that she would be ridiculed, because such rich people are probably used to eat only different delicacies. But she was worried for nothing. Her treat was received with joy, and they ate it with gusto, praising it. For Evelyn, it was so important and very pleasant. All in all, the relationship hit the ground running. And when, at the end of the evening, Evelyn rushed to help James's mother clean up and wash the dishes, she melted. That's what I call a daughter-in-law. Not afraid of housework. I respect that. I'm the same way. As you can see, we don't have a maid, although financially we could afford one. But my husband and I believe that family is such a quiet and cozy retreat where there is no room for outsiders. A man's job is to make money and be a breadwinner, and a woman's job is to keep the warmth of the home, to be a hostess, to understand and support her spouse in everything. I see that you are a good, modest girl, and you are calm for your son. I think we will get along. After 6 months of courting and passionate dating, James proposed to Evelyn. The girl was over the moon and immediately said yes. And today is that unforgettable and important day for every woman. She's getting married. The young couple walks out of the wedding palace, a gold wedding ring gleaming on their hand. They get into a gorgeous white limousine with James on it, and they're about to drive to the restaurant. The guests are already waiting there. Suddenly, there was a knock at the window of the car. A surprised Evelyn opened the window. A little girl of about 7 was looking in. She was so thin and poorly dressed that it brought tears to her eyes. She timidly held out a small, but very beautifully woven bouquet of daisies and asked, "Auntie, would you like to buy for happiness? It's not expensive at all, only $3. Evelyn couldn't resist buying the bouquet, giving the girl the money out of her purse. Suddenly, she noticed her braids. There was a special braid with multicolored ribbons, very intricate and beautiful. Only one person in the world could braid braids like that, her drowned friend Helen. Evelyn had not been able to repeat the braid. Why did the little girl have such braids? She had been possessed by something. Evelyn jumped out of the limousine and took the little girl a little to the side, asking her quietly, "Sweetheart, what's your name? Where are your parents? Don't worry, my name is Evelyn. Is there anything I can do for you?" The little girl answered frightenedly, "I'm Lisa, I'm 7 years old, and I live with my mother. Only she's very sick now. She can't get up. And my dad is gone. Mom says that he is a polar pilot and is on a distant expedition. But I don't believe it. I think he just left us. I'm selling bouquets to raise money for my mother's operation. I really want her to get better. I love her so much, and I live not far from here. The second house on the next street with a red roof. An excited Evelyn promised the girl, "You know what? I'll come visit you in a couple of days, can I? I'll meet your mom. Maybe I can help you with something." The little girl nodded. "Okay, Aunt Evelyn, come over. I'll be waiting for you." Evelyn hugged the baby goodbye and returned to her husband in the limousine. She was anxious and uneasy. What if it's my friend's daughter? Maybe she is not dead. Though how is that even possible? 100 questions and no answers yet. An excited James asked, "Sweetheart, what happened? What were you talking to that little girl about? You don't look like yourself." Evelyn answered in a trembling voice, "Honey, it's a long story, everything later. It's just that this little girl got into my heart, and there's one little thread that leads to my past. But I don't want to think about that today, on our holiday. Let's go have fun, my love." And she kissed her young husband tenderly. The wedding was a success, followed by an unforgettable wedding night, and for a couple of days, Evelyn could not tear herself away from her James. She was perfectly happy. But as soon as life was back on track, the girl hurried to Lisa's house, as she had promised. With a sinking heart, she rang the bell, then knocked, but no one opened the door. In the courtyard, a small, funny dog was barking. The neighbor, an elderly woman, came out at the noise and explained everything. "Are you here to see Helen? They took her away yesterday by ambulance. The poor thing got very sick, to the 3rd City Hospital. So there's no one home." Evelyn asked anxiously. "And Lisa, her daughter, where?" The elderly woman sighed. "Lisa is at my place, sleeping. Where should she be? Her mother is dying. She has terminal cancer. We'll have to send the girl to an orphanage. God forbid anything happens to Helen. I feel sorry for both of them. It's like someone jinxed them. What's Helen's last name? I want to visit her in the hospital. Roberts they are. And since you're going to Helen's, take a little present from me too. I'll be right back." The woman brought out some apples, pies, and a bottle of compote. Evelyn, unaware of herself, grabbed the bag and rushed to the hospital. All the way there, she worried. "Oh my God. Everything fits. The woman's name is Helen, just like her friend. But her last name was different. Probably her husband's. Was it really her? I wish I wasn't too late. Poor Lisa. What a fate the little girl has. I do not envy. How she loves Mommy. Collects every penny, so that she recovered." A pleasant young nurse was sitting at the emergency room window. Evelyn asked in a frantic voice, "Girl, sweetheart, which room is Helen Roberts in? She was brought to you by ambulance yesterday. I really need to see her." The nurse said indifferently, "She passed away in the morning. Doctors tried to resuscitate her, but they could not save her. We're very sorry for your loss. Are you a relative?" Tears streamed from Evelyn's eyes, and she scolded herself. "I'm late. I never got to see my friend. I was thinking about myself. I had no time, you see. And then Helen suffered because of me. And again, I did not help her. How could it be?" Suddenly it hit her, and Evelyn asked, "Can I at least say goodbye to her? A few minutes, please. She's my childhood friend, the closest thing you can get. We haven't seen each other for years." The nurse allowed it. "We haven't moved the body to the morgue yet. You can stay with her for a few minutes, but not too long, or I'll get in trouble. I'll show you out." On stiff legs, Evelyn walked behind the nurse. On the gurney lay the body of a woman, covered with a sheet. She inhaled more air, crossed herself, and resolutely opened the sheet. She almost cried out in shock. It wasn't Helen, not her friend. A completely different face, thin lips and nose, hair completely different. No, this was definitely not the Helen she had known since childhood. Evelyn covered the body back up and felt even somewhat relieved that it wasn't her friend lying there. But immediately she thought of Lisa, of the fact that the little girl had lost her mother today and didn't even know it yet. What was in store for her? A horrible orphanage. It could not be a worse place. The medical girl said quietly, "I'm sorry, she's so young and has so much to live for. They're sending the body to the morgue, and then we can do the funeral. Will you take her personal belongings and documents?" No one came to see the patient. That's why I'm asking, because I don't know who to give them to. Evelyn swallowed frantically. "Yes, I'll take everything and take care of the funeral." She was given the deceased's belongings, a watch, a pendant, and a small note, all that was left of the man. Evelyn opened it with trembling hands and read, "Lisa, my daughter, I am very sick. I do not know whether I will live until morning. Whatever happens, remember and know, I love you more than anything in the world, more than life. You're the only one I've got. Promise me that you'll study well, and you won't be a naughty girl, and you'll be the happiest one. For my sake. Kisses, my little bunny. Your favorite mommy." The girl could not remember how she got home. She was shaking and pounding. Her tears were pouring nonstop and covering her eyes. The woman's blue face was before her eyes, and poor Lisa. Evelyn was greatly worried. How would she tell her husband about everything? After all, she had no money for the funeral herself, and would James want to do it? After all, in fact, Lisa and her mother are complete strangers. But she could not stay away from the girl's problems either. Her conscience would not allow it. To distract herself, Evelyn cooked dinner, but everything literally fell apart. The omelette burned, she cut her finger with a knife and broke a cup. James arrived home late, tired and exhausted to the utmost. Work was taking up a lot of time and energy. His wife met him tenderly, affectionately, and began to feed him dinner. But she kept looking at her husband, and all did not dare to begin a difficult conversation. But he knew better than she knew the nature of Evelyn, and immediately realized that she was agitated. Her eyes are wet, something worries and saddens her. So he asked first, "Honey, what's wrong with you? Don't you have a face on you at all? I can tell something's wrong. Don't keep me in suspense, tell me." Evelyn exhaled and began the story. "Do you remember that little girl with the braids who sold us a bunch of daisies for our wedding? Well, I almost fainted when I saw the braiding on her braids. Only my friend from the orphanage, Helen, knew how to braid. And when I asked Lisa what her mother's name was, and she answered that it was Helen, then I absolutely decided that suddenly it is. Well, what if she wasn't dead then? The body was never found, remember I told you. And I promised the little girl I'd come and see her. So I went today. It turned out that her mom is sick with cancer and in the hospital, and the little girl is still with an elderly neighbor. I ran over there, and can you imagine? They told me that Helen died this morning. I started crying, cursing myself that I was late, and never got to meet my friend. And then I asked the nurse to look at the body and say goodbye. I threw back the sheet, and it wasn't her. It wasn't my Helen. I was even glad at first, and then the nurse asks me, who will take the body, things, and funerals? It turns out they don't have any relatives. I said in the heat of the moment, on emotion, that I would do it, and with you in fact did not consult. And Lisa to tears pathetic. She is only 7 years old, such a wonderful girl. What awaits her? An orphanage. I was in that hell, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. I've been crying all night, and I can't do anything. I was afraid to tell you. Otherwise you'll say, why do we need other people's problems and children? You'll probably scold me. James listened seriously, not interrupting. Then he hugged his wife tenderly. Evelyn, we've known each other 6 months. Have I ever sworn at you? What nonsense you are saying. The situation is really difficult. The girl's mother died, and there is no one to help her. It is a terrible grief for a child. Not every adult can handle it. Of course, we will help her go home with dignity. We are not financially poor. And about the girl, if you want, we can take her into our family and become her guardians and raise her as a proper child. How's that sound? The little girl is really pretty. She won't be a burden to us. Evelyn even burst into tears in an excess of emotion and threw herself on her husband's neck, kissing him. "How much I love you, James. You have a great, kind heart. Then I'll take Lisa to our place tomorrow, won't you? Can we help her through her grief together? And I'll make arrangements for the funeral and the wake. You're busy all day. I don't know how to tell a girl her mother's dead. I don't know how to tell her that her mother's dead," James advised. "Say that Mom has been transferred to another hospital for long-term treatment, and she'll stay with us for a while. And then we'll see." The very next morning, Evelyn went to the very same neighbor, and when she came out on the porch, she whispered softly to her, "Helen died yesterday. I'll take care of the funeral. My husband doesn't mind. Tomorrow at 12 o'clock, come and say goodbye. The wake is for 2 hours at Cafe Oriental. And I also want to take Lisa and adopt her. I can't let the child end up in an orphanage. Can I take the girl?" The neighbor cried and crossed herself, shaking her head. "God, what sorrow. May Helen rest in peace. Such a good woman she was, and young. And why did she have to suffer this misfortune? Thank you for everything. I am old already. I could not keep Lisa with me, and so sorry for her. A great girl, obedient and clever beyond her years. To see Helen off the whole street and for the funeral will chip in at least a little. But I don't understand why you decided to help this family, and you're so worried. You're not related to them, are you? It's so wild these days. Nowadays, young people are so cruel. God forbid, if you fall in the street, they will step over and go on. And you? I don't even know. I thought there were no such people." Evelyn sighed and answered, "You see, I'm an orphan myself. I grew up in an orphanage, and I suffered a lot there, so I can't let a beautiful girl like Lisa go there. That's all." A neighbor led Evelyn into the house. "Lisa, pleased to see her." "Oh, Aunt Evelyn, you're here. I remember you. You came to see me, didn't you? I'm so glad. I'm painting and helping my grandmother and waiting for my mother to come home. She'll be all right, won't she?" The child looked so intently into her eyes, without blinking, that everything inside Evelyn shrank and turned inside out. The woman could hardly suppress the tears in her throat and began a difficult conversation. "Lisa, honey, I have news for you and an important suggestion. Your mother was transferred today to another hospital, far away, in the capital city. Your grandmother is very old, and she can't keep you with her for long. I would like you to stay with our family for a while. I know we hardly know each other, and it's a little strange. But please, just trust me, Bunny. Neither me nor my husband you will not hurt. We'll love, play, and try to do everything to make you smile. Well, do you agree?" Lisa looked at Evelyn in a mature way and said quietly, "Don't treat me like a little girl. You're lying, aren't you? I could see it in your eyes. Mom wasn't transferred anywhere. She's dead, isn't she? Tell me the truth. I want to say goodbye to her too. I overheard the doctors talking a long time ago, and I know that Mom was seriously ill. Tell me the truth." Evelyn and her roommate looked at each other helplessly, tears rolling down their faces, and Evelyn only nodded. Then she handed Lisa the very note with the words, "I took this from the hospital. Mom left it for you. Do you want me to read it to you?" The girl shook her head negatively and began to whisper quietly, reading the text. With each word, tears rolled down her thin, almost transparent cheeks like beads. Lisa reread the note several times, and all the time held it to herself as the most precious treasure. The girl rummaged through the child's backpack and pulled out an impressive wad of money in bills and lots of change, and with trembling hands held it out to Evelyn. "That's what I was packing for my mom's surgery, but I didn't have time. I want you to spend it on Mom's funeral, please. Make her beautiful." And suddenly Lisa embraced Evelyn and burst into tears, no longer holding back, digesting the terrible truth. They sat like that for a long time, not moving from their seats, and mourned together the dearest person to the girl. The funeral was difficult, Not many people came, neighbors, and a couple of colleagues from Helen's former job. Evelyn did her best to fulfill the girl's request, and Helen lay in the coffin as if alive, dressed beautifully and strewn with flowers. Lisa cried for a long time, saying goodbye to her mother, and still would not let the coffin close, not wanting to let the closest person to heaven. Evelyn, as she could calm her down, and 100 times regretted that I told the girl the truth, fearing that her psyche will be damaged and will remain traumatic for life. But in the cafe at the wake, Lisa clung to her trustingly and said, "Thank you for telling the truth. I had to say goodbye to Mom. I'll keep her note. I get it. You want to adopt me. But why? Are you just sorry? I'm just a stranger to you." Evelyn was amazed at the mature judgment of a 7-year-old. She was even embarrassed, but she didn't lie this time either. "Yes, I'm sorry. I had a crush on you." Lisa, even back at the car. "And I don't want you to go to an orphanage. I see that you are clever and good girl. I think we will get along, and you will be able to love us as parents in time." Lisa answered quietly, "I'll try very hard not to let you down. And Mom too. Thank you, Aunt Evelyn. But I'm not going without my dogs, Squirrel, and my cat. I won't leave them. Can I take them?" Evelyn smiled. "Of course you can. You're doing a great job of not abandoning your pets and worrying about them. I love animals too. And by the way, I always wanted a cat, but it was impossible at the shelter. So I would be only too happy to have one. And James is my creepy dog person, so he'll totally get along with your squirrel." So Lisa came to live with Evelyn's family. Not everything went well at first. At first there were hurts, and the adjustment of the characters. Lisa was embarrassed and shy. She could not get used to someone else's house. Often in the evenings, she cried and missed her mommy, rereading that same note. But the adults were patient, did not press the girl, comforted and distracted her as best they could. The cat petted at her feet, purred affectionately, and didn't let her mope for long. Gradually, she accepted and loved Evelyn and James as if they were her own. When 6 months later, she ran into James's office and cried out joyously, "Daddy, let's go eat. Evelyn's mom made a cake that's going to rock." The man even wept and picked up the girl in his arms and began to kiss her on the cheeks. "I'm coming, my daughter. I'm coming, my good girl. Dibs on the biggest piece." He never once regretted the decision to adopt Lisa. With her arrival, the family became complete and real. The common care of the girl very much united him and Evelyn, and made one whole. James's parents also were sympathetic and were happy to babysit their granddaughter, amazed at her independence and adult judgment. Evelyn and the girl often went to the cemetery to visit her mother. The couple put a monument on her grave. The child sat for a long time on the bench, looking at the photo of a family member, and remembered different stories from his childhood. But all this time, Evelyn was still haunted by the story of Lisa's pigtails. She sensed that there was some mystery about them, but she couldn't solve it yet. And then, as if by golly, she had a dream about her dead friend at night. They were sitting with her, as they had been in their childhood, on the windowsill, as before, and Helen was braiding her braids in the same intricate weave, and she was saying, "Don't worry, my friend. Lisa will tell you where to find me." Evelyn woke up in a cold sweat, even uncomfortable, and a chill ran down her skin. In the morning, while packing the girl for school, she asked her cautiously, "Daughter, did your mother have any friends by any chance? Do you remember anyone? Do you know who taught your mother how to braid her hair so beautifully?" The girl nodded her head affirmatively, chewing on her cheese and sausage sandwich. "There was an aunt from her work. Her name was Helen too. She was the one who taught my mother how to do all sorts of beautiful hairstyles. Aunt Helen was nice. She always brought me candy and called me kitten." "Where does she live? Don't you know? Didn't you go to visit her?" Evelyn asked. The child replied, "She was put in jail when I was 6 years old. Aunt Helen worked in a store with my mother, and a lot of money was stolen there." Evelyn became uncomfortable. Could it be that Helen was alive and had gone down the wrong path, that she had stooped stealing? She asked again. And what? Did Aunt Helen steal that money? What did your mother tell you? Lisa replied, Mom said it wasn't her fault. The principal accused her on purpose. And why? I never understood. Evelyn's heart sank. How to find out exactly where her friend was sitting and whether Lisa had made a mistake, because she was still a child. The woman had borne the blame for Helen's death through her childhood and youth, and now it was imperative that she find out the truth and help her friend, if it was in her power. But once again, she could not do without James's help. This time, she immediately told her husband everything and asked for help directly. James responded, You know what? I have good acquaintances in the police. You write me the name, year of birth of a friend. Maybe he will run through his channels and find out where such a citizen is sitting. Evelyn kissed her husband tenderly. Thank you, honey. You're just a wizard. I love you. A couple of days later, James pleased his wife by bringing home the address of the prison where Helen was incarcerated. The prison was very far away, a 3-day drive. The article was grand larceny. Evelyn was shaking, her eyes lit up. James, honey, I have to talk to her. Look her in the eye. I don't believe Helen is a thief. She fought bloody in the orphanage. She hated stealing and injustice. It can't be her. I can't believe I'm onto something. You see, Helen was like a sister to me, even closer. She saved my life, and otherwise I would have been long gone on this earth. James kissed his wife on the top of her head and held her close to him. I had thought of that, too, so my acquaintances promised to take care of the date. You go, talk to your friend, find out everything. If she's innocent, we'll help in any way we can. Evelyn squealed with joy. Cute, my good, dear, beloved. How lucky I am to have you. Thank you for understanding me. 2 weeks later, Evelyn asked her grandmother to look after Lisa during the day while James was at work, to bring her home from school, to feed her, and to get ready for her trip. Evelyn was shaking. She couldn't believe she was about to see her Helen, alive and well. The woman was carrying a lot of presents for her, and the bag was just too heavy to carry. Finally, a flustered Evelyn heard. Helen's confined, facing the wall. You have 2 hours. The clock is ticking. The keys jingled, and Helen entered the visiting room. Evelyn hardly recognized her best friend in this haggard, gaunt, tall woman. In front of her stood the convict in a kerchief and a coarse uniform. She remembered her cheerful blue eyes. Now they were aloof and poker-faced. But when Helen saw Evelyn in front of her and recognized her, she immediately came to life, smiled happily, and threw her arms around her best friend. For the first 10 minutes, they just cried and hugged, and then they couldn't get enough of each other. Evelyn was shocked. Helen, Jesus, I thought you were dead. You were declared drowned. There was a wake. I was so grieved, I blamed myself. I blamed you for your death. I'm so glad you're alive. Tell me everything. The woman sighed and began to tell the story. I couldn't swim out then. I only managed to push you out, but I ran out of strength myself, and the current carried me down a kilometer. I must have lost consciousness. I don't know. I don't remember anything else. I woke up in the house. I'm lying on the bed. I can't understand anything. Where am I? What's wrong with me? The cough is suffocating. It prevents me from breathing. And it is so bad. It turned out that I was saved by an elderly fisherman, Stephen, who pumped me up and brought me home to his place. He lived in an almost abandoned village with his wife, Maria. They had a little girl, Betty, drowned many years ago, and they didn't have any more children. So they decided to give me away. They figured it was God Himself who sent me to them, to comfort me in my old age. I was sick for a long time. My mother nursed me with herbs and decoctions, steamed me in the bath, and gave me homemade goat milk. So little by little I recovered, and I stayed with them. They were good and kind people who sincerely loved me, and I gradually got used to them. I helped them in the garden and at home, and finished my rural school. Then I went to town to look for a job. They didn't take me anywhere without education and experience. I managed to find a job in a store. I had a good partner, Helen, like me. She taught me everything. We became friends, but the boss immediately laid eyes on me, pestered me repeatedly, hinted at intimacy. A very unpleasant guy. And I wouldn't do it. Mason threatened me, saying that if I didn't cooperate, he would give me a hard time. I should have quit quietly before it was too late, but I didn't take his threats seriously. And now, on my shift, suddenly found a huge shortage. How? I don't know. Only all the money had disappeared without a trace during the week. Mason called me a thief, made a scene, called the police, and they found all this money in my bag. But I didn't take it, I swear. I mean, why would I do such a stupid thing? To put myself in harm's way. You know me, I would never take someone else's money. At the trial, they gave me 2 years. It was such a blow to me, such a shame. I was slandered brazenly. No matter how many times I told them it wasn't my fault, nobody listened to me. Mason simply framed me, but I can't prove it. I had already served a year for nothing, but I was getting less and less strong. I feel so apathetic. I don't want to live. There's so much hell here. Orphan life seems sweeter than honey. What next? Who will need me with the stigma of being a convict for life? And the most frustrating thing is that one worthless scoundrel ruined my whole fate and remained unpunished. He lives happily ever after, while I suffer. Evelyn couldn't stand it, cried and hugged her friend again. Helen, don't say that. I need you. We're like sisters, remember? We can revise the case, reduce the sentence. I won't leave you. I'll support you. Don't you dare mope. You're not alone anymore. I'll ask James to help me again. I have a golden husband. He won't say no. Helen suddenly asked. Thank you, my friend. How did you even find me? You never told me. Evelyn laughed. Your braids helped. I was just having a wedding, and a little girl sold a bunch of daisies. Her name was Lisa, and her mom's name was Helen. I saw her braids and I got an electric shock. You're the only one who can do that. No one else. At first I thought you were her mother, but I was wrong. That woman, unfortunately, died of cancer. I adopted Lisa, but the pigtails kept bothering me, so I quietly asked the little girl if her mother had any friends. That's how I found out about you. Lisa told me that you worked with her mom in the store, and then you went to jail. I did not doubt for a minute that you are not guilty, because I know your character, and that no matter how hard it was, you would not steal. So I asked my husband, through his friends, to find out where you were. He understands everything. And he let me go to you, so he got us a date. I was very lucky with James. He was a godsend, not a husband. He loved Lisa as if she was his own, though it was not easy at first. The little girl very much grieved for a native mother, and for a long time got used to us. Helen was shocked. She cried, "Poor partner of mine. I feel so sorry for her. Such a young and good woman. And well done you for not abandoning the girl. I remember her well. I loved to play with her. Yes, I taught Helen how to braid my daughter's hair. And your husband seems to be a good man, since he agreed to raise someone else's child as his own. I'm glad, Evelyn, that at least you've had a good fortune. Not that I, the wretched one, am still tormented. I have no love, no normal life, and it seems there will be no more. I haven't even had a man yet, and somehow it didn't work out." And Helen again burst into tears on her best friend's shoulder. Evelyn comforted her. "What's the matter with you? What are your years? When you get out, I'll help you. I won't leave you. Everything will get better. You'll see. You have to believe in good things. And don't think about revenge. That scoundrel Mason will punish himself. You'll see. Be patient a little longer. I'll get you out of here. You didn't hesitate to save my life back then, even though you could hardly swim." They said a warm goodbye, and Evelyn went home, determined to help Helen no matter what. Once again, the faithful knight James was not let down. Helen's case was reviewed, and it turned out that she was not the first woman to be so brazenly set up by Mason. There were other victims who refused intimacy with the crooked businessman. They managed to find a cleaning lady who had accidentally seen Mason putting money in Helen's purse. The elderly woman was afraid of losing her job at the time and kept silent, but the lawyer managed to get her to talk her down, and persuade her to testify against Mason, especially since the cleaner was now retired and had nothing to lose. After a retrial, the woman was acquitted and released early, her criminal record expunged. It was the happiest day of both girlfriends' lives. Evelyn made all the preparations, laid a smart table, prepared the household, and welcomed Helen as the dearest guest. Lisa was also very happy because she remembered and loved her. The girl spun around the guest the whole evening, showing her collection of Smurfs and telling her about the progress in school. A friend gave Helen a huge bath towel and a lavender-scented terry robe, took her into the shower, and showed her to her room. The poor woman could not wash herself, and for an hour she must have washed away all her sorrows and misfortunes under the hot water, and could not rejoice. When her head touched the silk pillow, the woman immediately fell into a sweet, serene sleep. She had never slept like that in her long time within the walls of the colony. Helen was insanely grateful to Evelyn for finding her, supporting her, bringing her into her family, and welcoming her so warmly. She envied Evelyn with white envy, seeing how she and James loved and respected each other. What an easy and cozy atmosphere they had in the family. Lisa was clearly at home here. Helen sighed and dreamed, "I wish I could meet such a golden man to love, cherish, and nurture." James helped Helen get a job, took her to his firm as a manager, and rented her a small, comfortable apartment near their mansion. The woman was insanely grateful to Evelyn and her family for their help and support at the most difficult time in her life. And soon Helen's personal life got better. She met Sebastian at work. He also worked in the office as a programmer. The guy at first, as well as a little shunned Helen. After all, she is the prodigy of the director himself. But when he came to her office to set up her computer, they got to know each other. He liked her very much. Tall, pretty blonde. Her blue bottomless, sad eyes just beckoned. But Sebastian, a stocky, unattractive, bespectacled man, was not at all impressed with Helen, and she became just friends with him. They often drank coffee, shared secrets, and chatted about this and that. The guy looked at her that way, complimented her often, and was always there for her, helping to make repairs in her apartment, fixing her computer. He hoped that Helen would appreciate his efforts and realize that he liked her madly. But the girl was completely oblivious of Sebastian as her fiancé and only saw him as a friend. Several months passed like that. James, Evelyn's husband, was having a birthday party, and a friend invited her to a restaurant to celebrate. Many guests were expected, mostly families and couples, and Helen, not to be a loner, took Sebastian with her. Sebastian was over the moon. He was thoroughly prepared, dressed up in a suit and tie, and walked proudly into the restaurant, hand in hand with Helen. The girl, on the contrary, was a little embarrassed because Sebastian was half a head shorter than her and hurried to sit down at the table. The party was in full swing. Sebastian was asking Helen to all the slow dances, and he was courting to the utmost, being gallant and polite. He was just melting over his blue-eyed companion, who looked like a beautiful fairy in a flying chiffon dress and elegant high-heeled shoes. Evelyn, who was surreptitiously observing all the guests, could not stand it, and approached her friend with a glass of champagne. She said in her ear, "Congratulations, you finally have a suitor. Why don't you talk like a partisan?" "I don't know anything." Helen guffawed. "Oh, Sebastian, what kind of suitor is he?" "He's just a friend. I invited him along for company, so he wouldn't be boring. And he's kind of ugly." Evelyn shook her head. "You shouldn't do that, my friend. You can see Sebastian loves you. He's on fire. James told me about him. He's a very valuable and promising employee." and a good man. You can't go wrong with him. So you'd better watch out, or you'll miss out on your luck." They drank to the birthday boy's health, and Evelyn went back to her husband at the table. Suddenly, after her words, Helen unwillingly began to look at him, smiled at him, winked, and pulled him into a quick dance. It turned out that the guy perfectly moves, and the two of them danced dashing to incendiary music. Both of them got hot and stuffy, and after drinking a glass of mineral water, they went outside to get some air and cool off a bit. Helen wondered, "Wow, Sebastian, you're really something. You're such a great dancer. I didn't expect that. I've never had so much fun." The guy was already pretty drunk, so he got bolder and drew Helen sharply to him, and dug his lips into hers, kissed her greedily, and then said, "I'm not only a great dancer, but I can also cook and give massages. So marry me, Helen. I will be the most faithful and loyal. I cannot without you. You are like an obsession, like a star in the sky, settled in my heart from the first minute I saw you. Tell me honestly, don't you like me one little bit?" Yes? Helen was just so excited. Her head was spinning. She had no idea the guy was in love with her. She was insanely pleased and responded vigorously, "Kiss me again, because I'm not sure I got it right." Sebastian, in his joy, grabbed the girl in his arms, and they kissed passionately. To dispel any last doubts, Helen asked about the most painful and important thing to her. "What if I told you that I was an ex-con and spent a year in jail for something I didn't do, and that I was an orphan without a clan? Do you still love me? And I'm not sure I'll ever be able to get pregnant and have a baby with you. I caught a bad cold in the penal colony. We barely got out. And I'd never had a man before you. Never." Sebastian listened to her seriously, then answered, "Even if you had 5 children, I would love them like family. I don't care what your past was. I want you to have the happiest future with me. Do you understand? Love is either there or it isn't. A man is not loved for something. It's a gift from God." And Helen gave in, and the couple began to date. Sebastian enveloped her with such care and love, such tenderness and affection that she quickly stopped noticing his glasses and short stature, and saw in him the best, most beloved and reliable man in the world. A week later, the happy couple filed a registry office, and 2 months later, Helen unexpectedly became pregnant. Sebastian had done the impossible, for the woman had never hoped for a miracle so quickly. Now Evelyn and James were dancing merrily at their wedding. Evelyn and Helen were eating mushrooms and chatting away. At the same time, Sebastian and James were chatting amicably. Sebastian kept wondering, "James, if you don't mind my asking, is your wife Evelyn pregnant too?" He objected. "Why do you say that, Sebastian? Of course I would be happy. We've been together for a long time, but so far, alas, nothing works. At least we have Lisa, and taking care of her brings us closer together." Sebastian replied, "All right, my Helen in her condition, eating for 3, especially the pickles, but I've never seen Evelyn eat like that. Can't you see how your wife has changed? She's so rounded and handsome, you wouldn't know it. I may be wrong, but she looks very much like a woman in her condition." James thought about it, and suddenly realized that Evelyn had really changed lately, had become drowsy and absent-minded, falling asleep on the go. It was strange. Spouse gained a little weight, but it even pleased her husband, so she was even more attractive and appetizing than before. And what if? From this thought, the man's heart was ready to jump out of his chest. That same night, James couldn't stand it and asked Evelyn directly about it. "Cute, are you pregnant by any chance? Have you changed so much lately? And today at a friend's wedding you were eating pickles with her. You've never been a big fan of pickles. Or maybe I'm wrong, and I'm just imagining things." Evelyn laughed merrily. "There's no hiding it from you. You ruined the whole surprise. Yes, I'm pregnant too. My best friend, and I even managed to get pregnant almost at the same time, without talking. It was like a miracle. Only Helen and I wanted to go to the ultrasound together first, and then I would have told you myself. Do you want to come with us? You'll find out who we're having." James jumped up and down on the bed, sleep gone. He began to cuddle and kiss Evelyn, wailing, "My good one, my darling. God finally gave us a baby at last. I've been dreaming about it. Take care not to overload yourself with anything. Get plenty of rest. And eat your vitamins. Of course I'll go with you. What are you talking about?" James's dream had come true. Evelyn was expecting a boy, just like her best friend Helen. They were even almost the same term. The women were very happy because the children would grow up together, socialize, and be friends. It was a small thing to tell this news to Lisa so that she would not become jealous and would not be offended. All day long, 4 adult aunts and uncles racked their brains and came up with a speech, one of the harsher than another. But it all seemed like some kind of far-fetched nonsense. Finally, when the girl came home from school and had lunch, Evelyn and James exhaled and decided to talk. "Daughter, Daddy and I have something important to tell you. Tell me honestly, would you like to have a little brother or sister?" "That would be nice, wouldn't it? We would all bathe and play with the baby together. You'll always be our favorite little girl, you know that. We won't love you any less, don't think so." Lisa exhaled and responded in her usual serious, mature way. "You're like little kids. Do not worry so. I was not even upset. On the contrary, I am glad that it will be possible to the mother's daughter for real to play, and not for fun with a doll. Moreover, I am the older sister, so the baby will listen to me. Just would not hurt a lot. And then I know these boys." James laughed heartily, picked Lisa up in his arms, and began to squeeze her. "Our daughter is growing up smart beyond her years. She'll be a good example for her brother to follow. I have a responsible assignment for you. While I'm away, keep an eye on your mother, so she won't do any cleaning, and don't lift heavy things. She needs to take care of herself now. And this weekend, we'll all go to the countryside together with Aunt Helen and Sebastian. We'll swim and sunbathe. Didn't I promise to teach you how to bake potatoes on coals?" Lisa shouted, "Hooray!" and began to cheer and run around the room, all her seriousness disappearing in a flash, because after all, she was still a child. Thus, by chance, the destinies of the best friends first seemed to be torn forever, and then were reunited again. Both women treasured their friendship and were always ready to help each other. They were really closer than sisters. And the scoundrel Mason was punished by fate. At first, he took Helen's place in prison, and when he was released, his business was taken over by the competition, and he had to vegetate in a smoky den working as a common janitor for the rest of his life. After all, no one in the city gave him a hand. He had managed to displease a lot of people.